I was just beginning to drift into the kind of sleep that comes after a brutal shift, when a violent pounding rattled my front door. The television had been turned off minutes earlier, the last bits of news still echoing faintly in my head while I slumped on the sofa. My muscles were still aching from the chaos I'd handled at the downtown bar, where two drunk men had nearly broken chairs over each other's skulls before I stepped in. All I wanted was to close my eyes and pretend the world didn't exist for a few hours. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with its usual midnight noise, dogs barking at shadows, motorcycles speeding by, the same group of teenagers laughing on the corner like they owned the block. It was already past 1 a.m. when the knocking erupted again, more desperate, more frantic. Something in me snapped awake instantly. I stood, instinctively grabbing the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a wooden chair leg. I kept leaning against the wall, just in case. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to steady my voice. No one answered. Instead, I heard a soft, trembling whisper. "Mom, please, open." Every bone in my body went cold. I yanked the door open, and there she was, my daughter Sarah. Except she didn't look like my daughter. Her body collapsed into my arms before I could even speak. She was shaking violently, her breathing uneven, and when the porch light hit her face, I felt my heart tear open. Her left eye was swollen shut, skin darkened in angry purples. Her lip was split down the center, blood dried in uneven streaks. She clutched her stomach as if holding herself together. He hit me, Mom," she choked out, her voice cracking on every word. "Because of that woman. He hit me again." I didn't speak. Words would have failed me anyway. I guided her inside, laid her on the living room sofa, and rushed for the medical kit I'd always kept under the sink. My hands trembled as I pressed a cool cloth to her lip. The moment she winced, something primal inside me boiled over. But when she lifted her blouse, I nearly dropped the cloth. A massive bruise, dark, swollen, cruel spread across her stomach like someone had kicked her repeatedly. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My Sarah, the same child I used to chase around the yard, the same young woman who once laughed at everything and everyone, was now reduced to this broken, trembling silence. Was it Robert? I asked, although the answer was carved into her skin. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed the emergency doctor. While waiting for a taxi, her phone buzzed on the table. 7 missed calls. Messages flashed on the lock screen, short, threatening, laced with poison. "Open your mouth and you'll regret it." I reached for the phone, but Sarah flinched, grabbing it with both hands as if holding a bomb. "Don't look, Mom. Please, don't." I didn't push. She'd been pushed enough. I sat beside her, covering her trembling body with a blanket, whispering, "You're safe. I'm here." But deep down, I already knew this night was only the beginning. What happened at the hospital that night changed everything, and it was the moment I stopped being just a mother and became something much more dangerous. The taxi driver barely had time to blink before I pushed the back door open and guided Sarah inside. She curled over herself, clutching her abdomen while small, muffled whimpers escaped her lips. Every sound she made sliced through me like glass. I kept one arm around her shoulders, holding her steady as the car rattled through the uneven streets toward the emergency entrance. "Forgive me, Mum," she whispered into my shoulder, her voice thin and broken. I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't take it anymore. "You have nothing to apologize for," I said, but my voice shook, because deep inside, guilt clawed at me. I was her mother. I should have known. I should have seen the signs. I should have stopped this before she ever reached my doorstep at 1 a.m, bruised and bleeding. When we arrived, the bright white glow of the hospital sign stabbed through the darkness. "Dr. Letitia Figueroa, who had worked more night shifts than anyone I knew, was waiting by the door. One look at Sarah and her face turned solemn. Without a word, she signaled the nurses to take her inside. I followed the stretcher down the hallway, my boots echoing behind them like a heartbeat too fast, too loud, too full of fear. When the nurse slid Sarah's jacket off, I felt the world tilt. Her shoulders were marked with bruises finger-shaped, angry, undeniable. Her wrists were scraped. Her ribs were tender to the touch. The nurse gently lifted her arm and she whimpered. I had seen injuries like these, but on strangers, never on my daughter. We need x-rays, possibly a CT scan, Dr. Figueroa murmured, writing quickly. These bruises aren't light. I nodded stiffly. Words felt impossible. While Sarah was being examined, I stepped into the hallway to sign papers and arrange the immediate deposit. My phone buzzed. Again. The same number that had called earlier. Robert. I didn't answer. I didn't even consider it. When I returned to the examination room, Sarah was lying still, eyes shuttered, her breathing shallow. I could tell she was awake, but she seemed to be drifting somewhere far away from here, somewhere deep within the trauma she had endured. I pulled the blanket up around her shoulders, sitting down beside her. I watched the slow rise and fall of her chest. I remembered her first steps, her first day of school, her first heartbreak, and now, this something inside me, hardened. It wasn't anger anymore. It was resolve. Iron. Fire. When the scans returned, Dr. Figueroa confirmed no internal bleeding, but severe soft tissue trauma. Relief came, sharp and bittersweet. My daughter was alive. Hurt, but alive. But the wounds on her soul, those would take much longer to heal. I brought her home at dawn, setting her gently in her old childhood bed. I made warm milk, placed it on her nightstand, and watched as she drifted into an exhausted sleep. Her face, even in rest, bore the weight of fear. Stepping outside onto the porch, I found Ms. Camila sweeping her yard across the street. She hurried over as soon as she saw me, concern etched on her face. Elizabeth, what happened last night? I heard crying. Was it Sarah? I hesitated, then nodded. Her husband beat her and kicked her out. Camila's jaw tightened. Dios. That man is trash. My camera recorded the whole thing. You know, your girl knocking at your door. I can show you. My breath caught. Evidence. Proof. Strength. She handed me her phone, and there was the footage Sarah trembling in the dark, knocking desperately on my door. I recorded the video with my own phone, my hands steady for the first time all night. Get justice for her, Camila said, gripping my hand. Do not let him get away with this. Oh, I wasn't going to. Not anymore. When I put on my uniform later that morning, I stopped being a grieving mother and became the weapon Robert never expected. After placing Sarah safely in bed, I walked into my room and pulled open the closet. My police uniform hung there crisp, pressed, untouched since my last shift. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a mixture of anger and purpose build inside my chest. The time for hesitation had passed. I buttoned the shirt slowly, deliberately, each click a vow. I holstered my service weapon, tightened my belt, and tied my hair back. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the exhausted woman from the night before. I saw someone ready for war. Before doing anything else, I grabbed my digital camera and returned to Sarah's room. She was asleep, breathing softly, unaware that I was documenting every bruise, every mark, every bit of the hell she had survived. The flash illuminated each wound like a spotlight on the truth. But the worst part wasn't the photos, it was that I could see. Even in her sleep, she was still afraid. Once I had everything recorded, I went to the dining table, spread out my laptop, memory cards, and Camilla's footage, and began backing up every file onto external drives. 2 copies. 3, even. I wasn't working as a mother now. I was working as an officer building a case. By 8 a.m., sunlight was spilling through the windows. I warmed up soup, placed the tray next to Sarah, and gently woke her. She sat up slowly, wincing. "Mom, why are you wearing your uniform?" "To protect you," I said simply. "And to make sure this never happens again." She stared at me for a moment, then lowered her eyes. "I'm scared, I know." I squeezed her hand. "But I'm not." I took her back to the hospital for a follow-up. And while we waited for the scan results, her phone buzzed in my pocket. Robert. Again. I turned it off. I wasn't letting that man anywhere near her, not physically, not through words, not even through a ringing phone. When the scans confirmed she had no internal bleeding, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. We returned home and I immediately called James Ellison, our family lawyer. He told me to bring everything to his office. A few hours later, Sarah fell asleep on the couch, finally resting. Miss Camilla brought her fresh broth and hugged Sarah warmly before leaving. But just when I thought the weight of the day was easing, Sarah jolted awake from a nightmare, gasping. She clutched my arm, repeating, "He shoved me." And she was laughing. "Denise, she was there. She mocked me." My jaw clenched. Denise, the mistress. The other woman who had encouraged this violence. I didn't want to push Sarah, but she told me everything, how Denise would show up at the house, how she taunted her, how Robert would get drunk and turn the insults into blows. Every word was fuel for the fire inside me. I photographed her bruises again, this time close-ups, with timestamps. When Sarah felt well enough to leave, we went to James's office. He examined the photos, the video, the medical report, and finally nodded. "This is enough for a solid case," he said. "But we still need evidence of infidelity. We need to prove both abuse and betrayal." I didn't even hesitate. "I'll get it." That night, I didn't let Sarah stay home. I left her with Camila where patrol officers could keep watch. Then I changed into old jeans and a jacket, grabbed my camera, and drove toward the Archer's Bar, Robert's usual hideout. As I parked in the shadows and waited, I sensed the moment everything was about to change. What I caught on camera that night would become the weapon Robert never saw coming, and the beginning of his downfall. I waited in that alley with the engine off and my camera resting on my lap, my fingers cold from gripping it too tightly. The neon sign from Archer's Bar flickered in the distance, painting the pavement in harsh red flashes. I'd been there on duty plenty of times, breaking up fights, calming drunks, dragging out belligerent men who swore they were sober. But tonight, I wasn't there as an officer. I was there as a mother gathering ammunition. At exactly 8 p.m., Robert's silver truck rolled down the street, slow and confident, as if he owned the night. I ducked lower in my seat, turning on the camera. My heart was thudding, but my hands were steady. A moment later, the woman appeared from the far corner-type red dress, curled hair, cigarette dangling from her fingers like an accessory. Even from where I sat, I recognized her. Denise. So this was the woman who had mocked my daughter, while she was being torn apart emotionally and physically. She approached Robert with a smile that made my stomach turn. He turned off the engine, stepped out, and wrapped an arm around her waist with the kind of intimacy that should have belonged to his wife. My camera clicked. Once, twice, 10 times. Frame after frame captured their faces, their closeness, their betrayal. Every shot was another nail in his coffin. I followed them from a distance far enough to avoid suspicion but close enough to catch everything. They walked into a cheap hotel with a flashing red sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. My camera kept working. Them holding hands, entering together. Robert glancing around as if checking whether anyone noticed. But he didn't look behind him. Went around to the parking lot and captured his truck's license plate, along with a digital clock glowing nearby, proving the exact time. I stayed long enough to ensure I had everything, then drove home before they came out. My laptop lit up the dark living room as I transferred every photo into a secure folder. When I was certain the files were backed up, I called James. "I have proof," I said. "Enough to bury him." His voice sharpened. "Good. Keep everything hidden. Do not confront him yet." But fate had other plans. Before I could relax, Sarah called from Camila's house. She was whispering, panic bleeding into her voice. "Mom, he's asking around for me. He threatened one of my friends just now." I felt rage rise in me like a wave. "Stay inside," I told her. "Patrol will be there soon. I'm handling this." The moment I hung up, I called Commander Rosales and informed him of the threats. Within minutes, he sent 2 officers to watch over the area. Before ending the call, he said something that stayed with me. "Elizabeth, que Dios te cuide. A man like him won't go down quietly." He was right. That night, I sat at my dining table organizing the evidence. The photos of the injuries, the hospital report, the video from Camilla's camera, and now the infidelity pictures. Every piece of paper felt heavier than the last. It wasn't just a file, it was the truth, stitched together like a shield. But the weight I couldn't shake was the betrayal. Robert had once eaten at my table, laughed with my family, promised to protect Sarah. I had trusted him, trusted a monster hiding behind the face of a man. I felt the sting of tears, but I didn't let them fall. There was no room for weakness now. I had everything I needed to fight back. But the next morning, the war escalated, because Robert had allies I never expected, and the town turned against us. The next morning, the town felt different, colder, sharper, almost hostile. From the moment I stepped out to buy groceries, I could sense the shift. Whispers seemed to drift through the air like smoke. People who once greeted me with warmth now avoided my eyes. A pair of older women by the fruit stall leaned into each other, murmuring just loud enough for me to hear. "They say Sarah provoked him," one whispered. "I heard she made the whole thing up to trap Robert," the other added. The words struck harder than any physical blow. These were the same neighbors who watched my daughter grow up, who had shared laughter and stories with us. Yet now they believed lies whispered by a man who had nearly broken her. I kept walking, keeping my back straight, though inside my heart trembled. At the corner cafe, an older man sipped his coffee and shook his head disapprovingly. "Elizabeth thinks her badge makes her queen," he muttered as I passed. "Trying to ruin her son-in-law's life. Shame." I clenched my teeth and kept moving. By noon, James called me to his office. The moment I stepped inside, I saw a stack of papers on his desk, heavier than anything I had brought before. His face was tense. "Robert hired a high-profile lawyer from the capital," he said. "He's filed a counterclaim." I felt my stomach drop. James handed me the document. Page after page painted Sarah as a manipulator, a liar, a woman who supposedly harmed herself to accuse her husband. And me? I was being accused of abusing my authority, intimidating witnesses, and trying to seize land that apparently never belonged to me. "None of this is true," Sarah whispered, pale as paper. "Why would he?" "Because he's cornered," James answered. "And desperate men use lies like weapons." I wanted to comfort Sarah, but my anger was too sharp, too raw. Instead, I squeezed her hand. We left the office quietly. As we walked back through the alley behind the building, Two familiar faces stepped into our path. Robert's henchman, leaning against the wall, smirking, as if waiting for us. One lifted his chin. "Careful, Signora. People around here don't believe your story anymore." I pulled Sarah behind me. My voice dropped to a cold whisper. "If you take one step forward, I'll arrest the both of you." They laughed, but they didn't move closer. Still, their words lingered long after we walked away. By evening, the danger had grown more tangible. When I returned home, I saw an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single piece of paper, scribbled with ugly handwriting. "Shut up, or you lose your daughter." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then the fear turned into something else. Fury. Burning, unforgiving fury. I placed the note into the evidence folder. That night, James met with me again. He examined the threat and exhaled heavily. "He's getting reckless. But this could help us if we use it correctly. What we need now is someone on the inside. Someone who knows his actions." I knew exactly who that someone was. "Denise," I said. James nodded. "If we can get her to testify, everything changes." My mind replayed Sarah's trembling voice. Denise mocking her. Denise laughing. Denise encouraging Robert's cruelty. The thought of facing her made my stomach twist. But if she held information, if she could break the lies Robert had woven, then I had to find her. And convince her to turn. So that night, I went looking for the woman who helped destroy my daughter, hoping she might be the one who could help save her. I found the bar where Denise supposedly spent her nights at the far end of Hidalgo. Street small, dimly lit, and heavy with the smell of cigarette smoke. I dressed in a large hoodie and an old cap, blending into the late-night crowd. I wasn't there as a police officer tonight. I was there as a mother hunting the last missing piece of truth. The music thumped through the floor, loud enough to rattle the glasses on the counter. I slipped into a booth in the farthest corner, keeping my head down while my eyes remained fixed on the door. I waited. The minutes crawled. The ice in my drink melted untouched. Around 10 p.m. She walked in. Denise Salgado. Her red lipstick, her glittered dress, her high heels clicking against the floor. She looked nothing like the chaotic mistress I had imagined. She looked terrified beneath all that makeup. Her smile was too forced, her laugh too sharp. She scanned the room with eyes that were always calculating escape routes. I approached slowly and sat across from her. She stiffened instantly. "Do I know you?" she asked, voice defensive. Without answering, I slid an envelope across the table. She hesitated, opened it, and her face drained of color. Inside were photocopies of the forged land papers, and a printout of her bank statements, the ones showing maxed-out credit cards, overdue loans, and the foreclosure warning. "I'm not here to fight," I said quietly. "I'm here to offer you a way out." Her fingers trembled as she held the documents. "Where did you get this?" "Your boyfriend left a long trail of crimes," I replied. "And you're standing right next to him in half of them." She swallowed hard, struggling to keep her composure. "He told me everything was legal. He said the land was his wife's gift." "His wife didn't sign anything," I said. "He forged her signature. You'll go down with him if you stay silent." Denise froze. Her mascara-darkened eyelashes fluttered as the reality sank in. For a moment, I saw the woman beneath the dress, the one who thought Robert would make her life better, who fell for his sweet talk, who became trapped in his lies the way Sarah became trapped in his rage. She whispered, "He promised to pay off my debts, promised he'd take care of me. And instead," I said, "he dragged you into a crime you didn't understand." Her shoulders slumped, and she pressed a shaking hand to her forehead. Before she could respond, the bar door burst open. 2 men walked in. Robert's henchmen. They scanned the room, their eyes locking onto us. Denise single quotes, breath hitched. "He sent them," she whispered. I calmly took out my badge and placed it on the table. When the dim bar light struck the metal, both men stopped in their tracks. They lingered for a tense second, then stepped back and disappeared out the door. Denise stared at the badge as if seeing it for the first time. "He lied about everything," she said, voice cracking. "He said he had the police in his pocket." "He doesn't have me," I replied. She exhaled shakily. Then she looked up at me, really looked. "If I tell the truth, will you make sure nothing happens to me?" "I'll do everything in my power." There was a long silence. Then she nodded. "I'll testify." I immediately called Commander Rosales. He arranged a safe location outside town for Denise to stay until the trial. As we left the bar, Denise walked close to me, not out of trust, but out of fear. The street felt colder than usual, the wind slicing through us like a warning. But inside, for the first time in days, I felt something shift. A turning of the tide. A breach in Robert's fortress. A path forward. The day of the trial was the day truth finally met justice, and the moment Robert learned what happens when a mother refuses to break. The morning of the trial arrived wrapped in a tense stillness. Even the sky looked muted, grey and heavy, as if the world itself understood that this day would decide more than a legal case. It would decide whether my daughter could finally breathe again. I woke before dawn, made a pot of chicken broth, and gently woke Sarah. Her eyes were still puffy from the trauma she'd endured, but there was something new in her gaze, a fragile determination. I helped her choose a soft blue dress and covered the bruise on her neck with a scarf. When I brushed her hair behind her ear, I whispered, "You are not going into that courtroom alone." Outside, Commander Rosales waited with a patrol unit. He greeted us with a firm nod, his face solemn. "We're with you today," he said. It was the kind of reassurance that holds you together when everything else feels like it's falling apart. On the drive to the courthouse, we saw people lining the streets, neighbors, shop owners, bystanders. Some stared with sympathy, others with judgment. Small-town whispers traveled fast, faster than truth ever could. I held Sarah's hand tighter, shielding her from those gazes as best I could. When we reached the courthouse steps, Robert was already there, dressed in an immaculate suit, his hair slicked back, standing taller than he had any right to. His lawyer, Valdivia, hovered beside him like a vulture, and Denise, escorted by officers, stood far away from him, arms crossed, refusing to meet his eyes. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. People whispered as we walked to our seats. But once Judge Cervantes entered, silence blanketed the room. James began our case with a steady voice. Evidence after evidence appeared on the screen: the photos of Sarah's injuries, the hospital report, Camila's video capturing her desperate knocks at my door. Every time the images flashed, murmurs rippled across the benches. Those who had doubted us shifted uncomfortably. Then came the most damning evidence: the threatening message Robert had sent to Sarah. On the big screen, the words glowed like a confession. "Open your mouth and you'll regret it." Valdivia stood, trying to spin a story that painted Sarah as manipulative and me as a corrupt officer exploiting my badge. But lies crumble quickly when confronted by truth. And that truth came in the form of Denise. When she approached the stand, her hands trembled, but her voice, though shaky, delivered blow after blow to Robert's story. "He forged the signatures," she said. "He pressured me to help. He bragged the land would be his soon. And yes, I saw him hit Sarah more than once." Robert exploded from his seat, screaming accusations at her, at me, at Sarah. Officers had to restrain him. The courtroom recoiled, the mask finally ripped from his face. Next, it was my turn. I rose, placed my hand on the Bible, and spoke not as a police officer, but as a mother. I described the night Sarah staggered into my arms. The bruises, the threats, the fear, the shame she carried that was never hers to bear. There is no badge powerful enough, I said, to erase the truth of what he did. And the truth, laid bare before the court, was unmistakable. Judge Cervantes delivered the verdict slowly, each sentence falling like a hammer. Protection order granted. Assets frozen. Land transfer voided. Criminal charges forwarded to the district attorney. Robert sat stunned, pale, broken by the very system he thought he could manipulate. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. People murmured, "Justice was served." For the first time in months, the weight on my chest eased. Sarah slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "Mom, I feel like I can breathe again." We weren't healed yet, not fully, but we were free. And sometimes, freedom is the first step toward rebuilding everything that was stolen. As we walked away from the courthouse, I looked at my daughter and knew something with absolute clarity. No matter how dark life becomes, a mother's courage can bring the dawn.